Ethan stood in the crowded market, the air filled with smoke, loud voices, and the constant humming of old machines. He never wanted to be here. He had promised himself he would stay far away from the place where people were bought and sold like objects. But life on Earth had become so hard that even promises were difficult to keep. The government had forced citizens into a new interspecies program. They claimed it was for peace and unity, but everyone knew the truth. It was a cover for their cruelty. They wanted control, and Ethan, just a simple factory worker, had no power to refuse. He checked the small credit chip in his hand. It held only $20. That was everything he had left after paying his rent and buying food for the week. When the officer at the checkpoint told him the minimum amount was $20, Ethan felt sick. Anything sold for that price would mean the person was unwanted, mistreated, or close to death. The idea made his chest feel tight. He walked through rows of cages made of metal bars and dim lights. Inside them sat different alien refugees. Some looked human-like, some did not. Some hid behind their arms, too afraid to make eye contact. Others stared back with empty eyes. Ethan felt guilt crush him with every step. Finally, he reached the last cage in the row. Inside, sitting on the cold floor, was a thin alien woman. Her skin had a soft silver tint, almost glowing under the weak lights. Her dark hair hung down her shoulders, messy and tangled. She looked young, but there was a pain in her eyes that made her seem older. The seller tapped a device, unlocking the cage door. "This one is 20, he said in a bored voice. "She's weak, doesn't talk much, and she's trouble for most owners. A bad investment." Ethan swallowed. He hated every word the man said. She was not a bad investment. She was a person forced into this nightmare. "May I talk to her?" Ethan asked. The seller shrugged and stepped aside. Ethan crouched down in front of her. She kept her head lowered, her hands locked together. She did not move. "My name is Ethan," he said softly. I don't want to hurt you." The alien woman didn't look up, but her fingers twitched slightly, as if she was listening. "I don't think any of this is right," he continued. "But they said I had to choose someone. If I don't, they'll arrest me." Slowly, she raised her head. Her eyes were a deep blue, so bright they almost didn't look real. But they were filled with fear, pure fear. Ethan felt something break inside him. "I don't know your name," he whispered, "and I won't force you to come with me if you don't want to. But if you do, I promise I won't treat you like they do. I'll try to make things safe for you." The woman stared at him, studying his face as if trying to understand whether he meant the words. She opened her mouth slightly, but no sound came out. After a moment, she put a hand on her chest. "Lyra," she said softly. Her voice was faint, almost like she hadn't spoken in a long time. Ethan nodded. "Lyra, that's a beautiful name." The seller stepped forward, annoyed. "So, you taking her or not? I've got a line." Ethan stood up and pulled out the credit chip. His hands shook as he handed it over. $20. Felt wrong, terrible even. Lyra was worth so much more than that. No one deserved to be priced. The device beeped as the sale processed. "Congratulations," the seller said without emotion. "She's yours." Ethan hated the word yours. He wished he could erase it. Lyra slowly stood from the cage, her movements weak and tired. Ethan stepped back to give her space. She walked out, her steps uncertain, as if she expected to be hit or pulled back inside. "Please," Ethan said gently. "You can walk beside me. No one will touch you." She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. The market crowd pushed past them as they walked toward the exit. People stared at Lyra, some with disgust, others with curiosity. Ethan noticed her shrinking closer to him, her shoulders trembling. He moved slightly closer, not touching her, but making a small shield between her and the crowd. Outside the market, the air was cooler. The city lights flickered across tall, broken buildings. Lyra looked around in silent caution. "You're safe now," Ethan said quietly. She looked at him with those bright blue eyes again, unsure whether to believe him. She had been hurt many times before. But something in Ethan's voice made her want to trust him, even if only a little. He pointed toward the street ahead. My home isn't big. It's not fancy. But it's better than this place. You can rest there. Lyra nodded slowly. Ethan let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He wasn't sure what the future would bring. He wasn't sure how to protect her from everything happening in the city. But he knew one thing for certain. He would try. He would do everything he could to keep her safe. And maybe, just maybe, this terrible beginning didn't have to be the end of her story. Ethan walked with Lyra through the dim streets, but he knew this night was not over. The officials had been very clear when they gave him the order. Buying an alien was only the first step. The forced union ceremony had to be completed within 24 hours, or both he and Lyra would be taken away. No one ever returned once they were taken. They reached a small checkpoint near the old government building. The tall metal doors slowly opened when Ethan scanned the slip he was given at the market. 2 armed officers stepped forward. They looked at Lyra with cold, sharp eyes. New pair? One of them asked. Ethan nodded, trying to keep his voice steady. Yes. The officer checked his tablet. Name of the alien? Lyra, Ethan replied quietly. Lyra lowered her head at the sound of her name. She kept standing close to Ethan, but not touching him. She was afraid to move wrong, afraid to give the officers any reason to hurt her. The officer typed something, nodded once, and motioned for them to follow. Move. Ceremony room 3. Ethan and Lyra walked behind them. The hallway was cold, made of steel walls with bright overhead lights that buzzed. The place felt lifeless, like hope could not survive here. When they reached the room, the door slid open with a sharp sound. Inside was a large circular platform with strange markings. A thin government official stood at the center, holding a device that looked like a small tablet mixed with a scanner. The official frowned. You are late. Ethan looked at the clock on the wall. They weren't late. They were 10 minutes early. But he didn't argue. Arguing never helped. I'm sorry, Ethan said. The official sighed as if they had ruined her whole night. Stand on the platform. Both of you. Ethan stepped forward first. Lyra hesitated. The last time she stood on a platform like this, she was taken from her home. Memories flashed in her mind, shouts, hands pulling her, the light of a scanner. Her breathing grew fast. Ethan noticed. He turned to her slowly. It's all right, he said softly. I'm here. I won't let anyone hurt you. Lyra looked into his eyes. They were calm, steady, and warm in a place that felt freezing. She took a small step, then another, and finally joined him on the platform. The official lifted the scanning device. Hold still. Do not speak. Do not move. A bright beam of light scanned across Ethan and Lyra. Felt warm at first, then cold. Lyra flinched when the light touched her. But Ethan gently shook his head, reminding her she didn't have to be afraid. The official tapped the device. You two are now bonded under the Human-Alien Integration Program. This union is legal, permanent, and monitored. She said the words with no emotion, like she had repeated them thousands of times. Ethan felt a twist in his stomach. Permanent. Forced. It did not feel like a union. Felt like a chain. Lyra stood still, her eyes wide and uncertain. She didn't understand every word the official said. But she understood the tone. She understood control. The officer at the door stepped forward. He needs to state responsibility. She needs to confirm obedience. Ethan tensed. Is that necessary? The officer glared. It is the law. Ethan looked at Lyra with gentle eyes. He didn't want to say these words. They felt cruel. But if he refused, the officers would take her away. They would hurt her. He could not let that happen. He placed his hand over his chest. I will take responsibility for her safety, he said softly. I will not harm her. The officer raised a brow. That is not the usual statement. It is mine, Ethan replied. After a tense moment, the officer shrugged. Fine. Alien. Confirm obedience. Lyra looked confused. She didn't want to repeat those words. Her lips trembled. She looked at Ethan, searching his face for guidance. Ethan shook his head. You don't have to say that, he whispered. Say what you want. The official slammed her tablet down. She must confirm obedience or the union is invalid. Lyra felt fear rising in her chest. She needed to speak or she would be taken. She opened her mouth slowly. I will not cause harm, she said quietly. Her voice shook. I will try to live with him. The official rolled her eyes but tapped the tablet. Accepted. Ethan let out a breath, relieved. The officer pointed to the exit. Union complete. Leave immediately. And remember, the program will monitor you. Any trouble from the alien, report it at once. Ethan nodded, though he hated every word. He gently motioned for Lyra to follow him. She walked beside him, her steps small and careful. When they left the room, the hallway felt less cold than before, though the buzzing lights still hummed above. Once they reached the outside door, Ethan held it open for her. The night air was cool again, brushing against their skin. Lyra looked up at the sky as if seeing it for the first time since her capture. You're all right now, Ethan said gently. We're done here. Lyra turned to him slowly. Her voice was soft but clearer than before. Thank you for helping me. Ethan offered a small smile. You don't have to thank me. I'm just trying to do what's right. She studied his face again. Her blue eyes full of emotion she didn't know how to express. Slowly, she nodded. As they walked back toward the city streets, the forced bond between them felt heavy. But somewhere in that weight, something small and fragile began to form. Not love, not yet, but a beginning, something new, something hopeful in a world that had forgotten hope. Ethan led Lyra through the quiet streets toward his small apartment. The city outside looked rough, with broken signs, cracked roads, and flickering lights. Lyra walked close to him, not because she fully trusted him yet, but because everything around her felt strange and dangerous. Every loud noise made her flinch, and every shadow made her look twice. When they reached Ethan's building, he opened the door slowly. The hallway inside smelled like old paint and dust. It wasn't perfect, but it was safe. That was all he could offer. This is where I live, Ethan said gently. It's small, but you can rest here. Lyra nodded, her eyes scanning every corner. She didn't step inside right away. She waited, unsure if she was allowed. Ethan noticed and stepped aside. You can go in. You don't need permission. Her steps were slow as she entered. She looked around the apartment. It had one couch, a small kitchen, and a single bedroom. The furniture was old, but everything was clean and placed carefully. Ethan had always lived simply. I will prepare a room for you, Ethan said. You can have the bedroom. I'll sleep on the couch. Lyra blinked in surprise. In her past, humans never offered her anything kind. She watched him walk into the bedroom and remove a few things he had stored there. You sleep outside? She asked softly. Yes, Ethan said with a small smile. You need a private space. You can lock the door if you want. The idea of privacy felt strange to Lyra. She had not had her own space since before she was captured. Her hands trembled slightly. Ethan returned with a blanket and placed it neatly on the bed. You can rest whenever you want. But if you are hungry, I can make something. Lyra followed him to the kitchen. Her steps were so quiet that Ethan barely heard her. She watched as he opened cabinets and looked for something she could eat. I'm not sure what foods are safe for you, he said. I don't want to make you sick. Lyra hesitated, then pointed at a few vegetables on the counter. These. I can eat these. All right, Ethan said. I'll cook something simple. While he prepared the meal, Lyra sat at the small table. She watched his hands move. They were steady, careful, and gentle. He wasn't loud. He didn't shout. He didn't curse. He didn't treat her like she was a burden. Confused her. When the food was ready, Ethan placed a plate in front of her. Lyra looked at it for a long moment. Her instincts told her to wait for permission, but Ethan simply sat down and began eating. You can eat, he said softly. It's okay. She nodded and slowly took a bite. The warm food surprised her. It had been so long since she tasted something that wasn't given through force or thrown at her. After a few bites, Ethan noticed her eyes watering slightly. Are you all right? Lyra quickly wiped her face. It's just warm. I forgot what warm food feels like. Ethan's chest tightened. You don't have to explain. You're safe here. They ate in silence for a few minutes. Lyra occasionally looked up, studying Ethan. She didn't understand why he treated her kindly. She didn't understand why he spoke softly. She didn't understand why he didn't demand anything from her. He stood up and washed the dishes when they were done. Lyra watched him, her head slightly tilted. You do everything yourself? She asked. Yeah, Ethan said. I'm used to taking care of things alone. Lyra lowered her eyes. What do you want me to do? Ethan paused. Nothing. She looked confused. Nothing? You don't have to work. You don't have to clean. You don't have to serve me. You're not here to be used. Lyra stared at him, shocked by his words. Then why did you buy me? Ethan leaned against the counter and sighed. Because if I didn't, someone worse would have. I didn't want that to happen to you. Lyra's throat tightened. No human had ever said something like that to her. After a moment, Ethan gestured toward the bedroom. You should rest. If you need anything, you can wake me. Lyra stood slowly. She looked at the bedroom door, then back at Ethan. Are you sure I can close the door? Of course, Ethan said. You don't need to ask. Lyra walked to the room and stepped inside. She placed her hand on the door and paused. She looked at Ethan one last time. Thank you, she whispered. Ethan smiled gently. Good night, Lyra. She nodded and closed the door softly. For the first time in a long time, she felt a small sense of safety. It was new. It was confusing. But it was real. And as Ethan lay down on the couch, staring at the ceiling, he felt something too. Maybe this forced union did not have to be a prison. Maybe it could be the start of healing. Maybe it could be the beginning of something that neither of them expected. The next morning, Ethan woke up early on the couch. His neck hurt from the awkward position, but he didn't mind. He sat up slowly and stretched, listening to the quiet apartment. For a moment, he wondered if Lyra was still asleep, or if she had spent the night frightened and awake. He walked toward the kitchen to make breakfast. As he passed the bedroom door, he noticed it was open just a little. Lyra stood inside, looking around the small room with careful eyes. When she saw Ethan, she froze like she was afraid she had done something wrong. You can come out whenever you want, Ethan said with a warm smile. You don't need to stay in there. Lyra nodded slowly. She walked out, her steps soft. She still looked unsure, like every move needed thought. I'm making breakfast, Ethan said. You can sit wherever you like. Lyra sat at the small table, her fingers touching the edge lightly. She watched Ethan quietly as he cooked. There was something calming about the way he moved, simple, steady, not rushed. But the peace didn't last long. A loud noise outside made Lyra jump. Ethan looked toward the window and frowned. More noise followed. Shouting, crashing, and the heavy sound of boots. Ethan walked to the window and moved the curtain a little. What he saw made his stomach drop. A group of people wearing dark clothes and masks marched down the street. They carried signs and weapons, pipes, chains, anything they could find. Their voices carried through the air. Humans first, they shouted. Send the aliens back. Ethan closed the curtain quickly. What is happening? Lyra asked, her voice shaking. They're part of a group, Ethan said softly. They hate aliens. They've been getting stronger lately. The city's been full of protests and attacks. Lyra's eyes filled with fear. Her hands gripped the table so tightly her knuckles turned pale. Are they coming here? She whispered. I hope not, Ethan said, but even he didn't believe his own words. A sudden crash echoed from outside, followed by breaking glass. Lyra stood from her chair instantly. Ethan moved fast. Stay behind me. Another crash. This time it was in their building. Voices echoed in the hallway. Angry, loud. Ethan quickly turned off the stove and grabbed Lyra's hand. We need to leave. Now. She followed without question. Her heart raced as she heard footsteps getting closer. Ethan opened the back door of the apartment that led to an emergency stairwell. It was dark and smelled like old metal, but it was the only safe exit. Hurry, Ethan whispered. They moved down the stairs quickly. Lyra stayed close to him, her breathing fast. She kept looking up, afraid someone would burst through the door at any moment. When they reached the bottom, Ethan pushed open the exit door and stepped into an alleyway. It was quiet, but he didn't slow down. "Where do we go?" Lyra asked. "Somewhere safe," Ethan said. "We can't stay near the apartment. They know aliens live in this area." They walked fast through the empty streets. Lyra looked around nervously, her senses sharp. She felt danger in every shadow. After several blocks, Ethan stopped behind an old storage building. He leaned against the wall, trying to catch his breath. "I'm sorry," he said, rubbing his forehead. "I should have taken you somewhere safer earlier." Lyra shook her head. "You didn't know this would happen." Ethan sighed. "They're getting more violent every day. The government does nothing. They want humans and aliens to fight. It helps them keep control." Lyra lowered her eyes. "This is because of me." "No," Ethan said firmly. "This is because of them. You did nothing wrong." She looked up at him, surprised by his strong voice. "You didn't cause this," Ethan repeated. "They did." A moment of silence passed. Lyra's breathing slowed a little. "Where will we go?" she asked in a smaller voice. "I know a place," Ethan said. "An old research facility outside the city. No one uses it anymore. We can hide there for a while." Lyra nodded. She didn't know if it would be safe, but she trusted Ethan more than she trusted anyone else. They began walking again, sticking to the quiet streets. Lyra looked at the sky as they moved. Even though it was daytime, clouds covered the sun, making everything look gray. After a few minutes, she spoke softly. "Why do they hate us?" Ethan thought for a moment. "Fear. And because the government tells them lies. They think aliens want to take over. They think you're all dangerous." Lyra looked down. "I only wanted peace. My people only wanted peace." "I know," Ethan said. They walked in silence for a while. The city slowly faded behind them. The noise of anger and violence became distant. As they moved toward the outskirts, Lyra looked at Ethan with new eyes. He had protected her. He had stood between her and danger. He had given her kindness when the world gave her cruelty. For the first time, Lyra felt something warm inside her chest. Trust. She didn't fully understand it yet, but she knew one thing. She was not alone anymore, and neither was Ethan. The next morning began with a tense quiet. The ship drifted through a calm stretch of space, but Evan could feel trouble waiting somewhere ahead. He went to check on Ryloth, who was sitting near the small window, staring at the stars. His tail moved slowly, showing he was unsure. Evan sat beside him and spoke softly. "We need to talk about yesterday. You did something dangerous." Ryloth lowered his head. "I only wanted to help. You were in danger, and I could not stay still." Evan understood the fear behind those words. The alien was not trying to cause chaos. He was trying to protect the only person who had ever treated him kindly. Later that day, Captain Harris called Evan to the control deck. His face was serious. "We picked up a signal. A raider ship is heading our way. They might be tracking your new companion." Evan felt cold. Ryloth's past was catching up. Evan hurried back to their room and told Ryloth what was happening. Ryloth looked even more scared, but this time he did not pull away. "They want to take me back. They will punish me for escaping. If they board this ship, everyone will be in danger because of me." Evan shook his head. "You are not their property anymore. I won't let them take you." For a moment, Ryloth stared at him, confused by the certainty in Evan's voice. It was clear he was not used to someone standing up for him. As the alarm lights began to flash, the whole ship moved into defense mode. The crew ran to their stations and Evan grabbed a small blaster, even though he was not a fighter. Ryloth watched him with worry. "You cannot fight them. They are stronger, faster." Evan cut him off. "Maybe, but I'm not letting them hurt you." When the raider ship came into view, the tension grew heavier. The enemy vessel was large, dark, and marked with symbols Ryloth clearly recognized. His hands trembled. The first shot hit the ship, shaking the walls. Ryloth threw himself between Evan and the falling debris, shielding him again. Evan grabbed Ryloth's arm and pulled him close. "Stay with me. We will get through this." Another blast hit, and the lights flickered. The situation was getting worse. Harris shouted through the ship speakers, telling everyone to prepare for boarding. Evan held Ryloth's hand tightly. Ryloth whispered, "If they take me, I will lose everything I found here. I will lose you." Evan's heart tightened. He wanted to say something comforting, something brave, but the pounding on the outer hatch told them they were out of time. As the enemy began forcing their way inside, Evan made a choice. "We're not running. We're facing them together." Ryloth nodded, fear still in his eyes, but also something new: trust. Side by side, they stepped forward as the door began to break open, ready to face whatever came through it. The raiders forced their way onto the ship with a blast that echoed through the metal corridors. Smoke covered the doorway, and shapes moved inside it, tall, armored aliens with sharp helmets and heavy weapons. Evan felt Ryloth tense beside him. These were the same kind who once owned him. Ryloth stepped in front of Evan without thinking, his tail low but his posture firm. Evan whispered, "Stay behind cover. We do this smart." Ryloth slowly nodded, trying to stay calm. The raiders scanned the hallway until their leader stepped forward, a large figure with harsh eyes. He pointed at Ryloth. "That one. Return the property to its rightful owners, and no one dies." His voice was cold. Evan stepped in front of Ryloth. "He's not your property. He's a living being, and he stays with us." The raiders laughed, but their leader did not. Ryloth tapped Evan's arm gently. "They will not stop. They are trained only to obey orders. If we fight, you could be hurt because of me." His voice shook, but he did not step away from Evan. Evan answered, "Then we protect each other." The corridor exploded into chaos when the first raider fired. Evan pulled Ryloth behind a support beam as sparks burst from the wall. Ryloth grabbed Evan's wrist to steady him and then looked around quickly. "There is a vent behind you. If we can reach the engine bay, we can cut off their access. They will be trapped in one part of the ship." Evan nodded and signaled to him to move. Together, they slipped into the vent while the crew kept the raiders busy. Evan crawled ahead, and Ryloth followed silently. The metal tunnel echoed with distant sounds of fighting. They reached the engine bay, which was warm and filled with humming machines. Ryloth pointed to a control panel. "If I lock the bulkheads, they cannot spread through the ship. But once I do it, we must help the others fight the ones already inside." Evan agreed. "Do it. I'll cover you." He raised his blaster and kept watch. Ryloth worked quickly, typing commands with surprising skill. The ship groaned as doors sealed across the corridors. A moment later, the intercom crackled with Captain Harris's voice. "Good work. They're trapped in Section C. All units move in." Ryloth turned back, relief on his face, but it vanished when the engine bay doors burst open. A raider had broken through. The alien warrior charged at Ryloth. Evan fired, but the raider dodged and slammed Evan aside. Ryloth stepped in front of him, letting out a sound Evan had never heard. A deep, fierce growl that echoed through the room. The raider hesitated for a single second. Ryloth used that moment to leap forward, tackling him. The two crashed into the metal floor, wrestling for control. Evan tried to reach them, dizzy from the hit. Ryloth pushed the raider back, his strength surprising even the attacker. Evan managed to grab his blaster again and fired. The shot hit the raider's armor, and the enemy collapsed. Breathing hard, Ryloth crawled over to Evan. "Are you hurt?" Evan shook his head slowly. "Just bruised." "You saved me." Ryloth looked away for a moment, then whispered, "You saved me first." Before they could say more, Captain Harris and 2 crew members arrived. "Both of you, good work. The raiders are retreating. You turned the whole battle." Ryloth looked surprised, almost unsure if he deserved the praise. Evan placed a hand on his shoulder. "You did great." And for the first time, Ryloth allowed himself a small, shy smile. The ship finally grew quiet after the battle. The alarm stopped, the lights steadied, and the crew began repairing the damage. But for Evan and Ryloth, the silence felt heavy in a different way. They walked back to their room slowly, both tired and shaken. Inside the small cabin, Evan sat on the edge of the bed and let out a long breath. Ryloth stood near the door, his shoulders tense and his tail curled close to his body. Evan noticed the way his hands trembled slightly. "You okay?" Evan asked softly. Ryloth looked down. "I thought they would take me again. I thought I would lose everything I found here. Everything I found with you." His voice was low and unsure. Evan stepped closer. "You're safe now. They didn't take you. And I'm not letting them, not ever." Ryloth raised his eyes, and there was something deep in them, something that had been growing quietly for days. For a long moment, neither spoke. The air felt warm between them. Later, Captain Harris called Evan to the control deck. Ryloth followed, staying close. Harris looked at them with a serious expression. "We got a message from the Raiders Command. They're demanding the return of their lost property. They claim Ryloth still belongs to them." Ryloth flinched at the word. Evan's jaw tightened. "He's not property. He's a person." Harris nodded. "I agree, but they won't drop it easily. They sent a warning. If we refuse, they'll come back with a larger force." The room fell quiet. Ryloth stepped forward. "Captain, I don't want your ship in danger because of me. If I leave, maybe they will stop." Evan turned to him immediately. "Absolutely not. I'm not letting you go back to them." Ryloth tried to speak, but Evan shook his head firmly. "You deserve freedom. You deserve a life. You deserve more." The last word hung in the air. Harris sighed. "We may have one option. There's a neutral station not far from here, Station Haven. It's run by an independent council. If we register Ryloth there as a free individual, the Raiders won't have legal claim to him anymore. The council's laws outrank theirs." Ryloth looked surprised. "I can be legally free?" "Yes," Harris said. "But the Raiders may try to stop us before we reach the station. They don't want to lose control." Evan placed a hand on Ryloth's arm. "Then we'll just have to get there fast. And together." Ryloth stared at Evan's hand, then slowly covered it with his own. "I trust you," he whispered. On their way out, they passed several crew members who nodded respectfully at Ryloth. He seemed unsure how to react. No one had ever looked at him with respect before. Back in their cabin, Evan noticed Ryloth staring at his reflection in the window, looking thoughtful. Evan approached. "What are you thinking about?" Ryloth spoke quietly. "All my life, others decided everything for me. Where I went, what I ate, how I lived, even who I belonged to. But now I feel something new, like I'm allowed to want something for myself." He turned to Evan. "And I know what I want." Evan's chest tightened. Ryloth stepped closer, close enough for Evan to feel his warmth. "I want to stay with you, not because I was ordered, not because I was forced, but because it feels right." Evan swallowed, his voice soft. "I want you to stay too." Ryloth's eyes softened, full of a quiet, growing affection that had been waiting for a moment like this. Before either could say more, the ship's intercom buzzed loudly. "All crew prepare for immediate departure. We head for Station Haven at full speed. Potential enemy pursuit detected." Ryloth took Evan's hand. "Then we face it together." Evan squeezed his hand back. Together. Part 8. The ship sped through the dark stretch of space, heading straight for Station Haven. The crew moved efficiently, but everyone knew the danger still lingered. Ethan and Lyra stayed close, their hands brushing as they prepared for any possible attack. The approach to Station Haven was tense. Sensors picked up distant vessels that could be raiders, but they were far enough to not cause immediate danger. Ethan guided Lyra to the observation deck, where the neutral station appeared on the horizon, glowing faintly against the black of space. "It's beautiful," Lyra whispered, pressing her forehead against the cool glass, staring at the lights. Ethan smiled. "It's safe here. You can finally be free." When the ship docked, officials from Station Haven boarded immediately. They were calm, professional, and, most importantly, neutral. Lyra was led to a small chamber where the paperwork could be processed. She looked nervous but stood tall. One of the officials looked at her kindly. Lyra, we recognize you as a free individual. You have full rights here, and no one may claim you as property. Do you understand? Lyra nodded slowly, her eyes wide. I understand. Ethan stood beside her. You're free, he said softly. For the first time in her life, Lyra felt that freedom not as a threat but as a gift. The weight of fear and oppression lifted slightly from her shoulders. She looked at Ethan, gratitude and something deeper shining in her eyes. After the official paperwork was complete, they walked together through the halls of the station. People glanced at Lyra with curiosity, some with respect, a few with cautious smiles. She realized she was not alone anymore, and that feeling brought warmth to her chest. Later, they found a quiet place overlooking a small garden on the station. Lush greenery and flowing water were carefully maintained. Lyra knelt beside a small fountain, touching the water gently. Ethan sat next to her. You don't have to worry about anyone taking you away now. Lyra turned to him, a small smile forming. And I don't want to leave. Not now. Not ever. Ethan reached for her hand. Then stay. Let's face whatever comes next together. Lyra nodded, placing her hand over Ethan's. Together, as they sat in silence, watching the soft glow of the garden lights, they realized that their story, which had begun with fear and coercion, had transformed into something beautiful. The bond formed out of desperation and danger had grown into trust, respect, and a quiet, deep love. The galaxy outside remained chaotic, full of dangers and uncertainties. But within the small space they shared, hope and companionship flourished. For the first time, both Ethan and Lyra felt they had found a place. Not just a safe station, but a home in each other's presence. And as they watched the stars together, they knew that no matter what the universe threw at them, they would face it as partners, equals, and finally, true companions.